The next, what I've just shown is a trio of tools which I call the one-step immigration triangle. You've seen how to search by passengers by name using the white, blue, and gray search form. You've seen how we search for ship arrivals using the one-step ship lists form. And we've seen the other form, which the ship list form actually took us to, which gave us direct access to microfilm rolls. I'm pointing this triangle out now because you'll see for other ports and for other years, I stick with this triangle theme, and I'll put in the trio of tools for searching the different ports and the different years. Next is ship pictures. Once you've found your passenger, you found the ship record, you have the manifest, you'd like to have a picture of the ship that brought him over on it. So there's a one-step website which ties into other websites that have collections of pictures of ships. These are various websites that I found that have large collections of ships. You put in the ship name, specify which one of these databases you want to search in, and if they have a picture of that ship, I'll bring it up. So let's search for the Carpathia. We'll go one by one through the various other websites to see who has a picture of the Carpathia. Carpathia is actually a well-known ship. Anybody know what it's famous for?
Titanic.
Yes, it did pick up the survived the Titanic back in 1912, but it's more famous for what happened the following year in 1913. It returned to Europe, came back again, and brought my grandmother across. So let's search for pictures of the Carpathia, which I want from my genealogy scrapbook. On the Kidships website, I find some nice shots of the Carpathia. On the Ellis Island website themselves, I find some pictures of the Carpathia. On the Cimarelli website, there's a nice picture of the Carpathia. On the Great Ocean Liner site, there's a lot of information about the Carpathia besides pictures. I'm sure they tell all about the Titanic rescue there. On the Great Ships website, there's some more pictures of the Carpathia, and so forth. Some of the websites didn't have pictures of the ship, but I found another on the website that I did find. Different websites will have pictures of different ships, obviously. If I wanted still more information, there's another one-step page which tells you about ships and fleets. I can enter either a ship name or a fleet name and get a lot more information about that. So I'll enter the Carpathia, do my search. Gives me this information about it. The ship name, the fleet is the British North American Fleet. I can get more details still. I press on the details button. It tells me the name of the fleet, the ship. It was built in 1902. It was in service till 1918. And it rescued the survivors of the Titanic in 1912. Of course, I will put my own pencil marks in that I think is even more important in 1913. And another one-step site, if you need to get the roll numbers, the roll numbers, if you go into the National Archives and you want to pull out the microfilm roll directly, or if you go down to the Family History Library and you pull out the roll directly, this one-step site lets you enter the year, the day in the year, and will tell you the NARA roll number and the FHL roll number. The next section of the website has to do with the Castle Garden arrivals. Castle Garden preceded Ellis Island. Let's say a few words about arrivals into New York Harbor. Before 1855, there was no processing. The passengers just walked off the ship. In 1855, things started getting a little bit tougher. They didn't want these immigrants coming into this country. They wanted to keep America for Americans and all that sort of stuff. So they started having processing, but each port had their own processing centers. Castle Garden was the processing center in New York. It started in 1855 and up to 1890. 1890, the federal government took over and wanted to make the sea more strenuous, to filter out the arrivals. This was down the peak years of immigration. They wanted to cut that down. So they centralized it all, and in New York they put up Ellis Island instead of Castle Garden. But Ellis Island wasn't ready yet, so for 2 years they would process them at the barge office. And then starting in 1892, they used Ellis Island. There was a fire in 1897, so for 3 years they went back to the barge office. And then starting in 1900, back to Ellis Island, up to 1924. After 1924, there was what they call it, basically the quota system, which really knocked down a lot of immigrant arrivals, and they started processing the immigrants at the consular offices back in Europe, or back wherever the whole country was. So there's no more processing done at Ellis Island, no processing in this country. It's all being done overseas, and only in special cases and exceptional cases that they processed them in Ellis Island up to 1955. But basically, 1924 is when it stopped being used for the most part for passenger processing. The records from 1892 to 1924, when Ellis Island was being used, are on in the Ellis Island database. The records preceding that, which include the Castle Garden years, as well as the barge office years, which was the temporary bridge until Ellis Island was ready, and even preceding Castle Garden, all those are what I call the Castle Garden database. So it's more than just Castle Garden. With that, you can then search Castle Garden data, and there are two websites that have the data for Castle Garden, Ancestry.com and CastleGarden.org. The big difference is one is free and one costs money. The Ancestry.com requires a paid subscription. The CastleGarden.org does not. Ancestry includes all Ancestry includes the manifest images as well. There are no manifest images on the CastleGarden.org. Ancestry covers the years of 1820 to 1850 and separately 1851 to 1891. So that's quite a span of years. The CastleGarden.org claims to cover years 1830 to 1897. It's not clear what they actually cover. I've had some trouble trying to figure that out by running various tests. It also allows for browsing through passenger records, and we'll show that in more detail in a second. Again, that immigration triangle, the passenger names, ship arrivals, and microfilm rolls. I did carry those same trio of tools that I had for Ellis Island. I put up for Castle Garden. For Ancestry, I have those three tools, exactly as you see. For Castle Garden, well, they don't have direct access to the manifest, so all that makes sense with the passenger names. But I allow another tool to browse through the records on Castle Garden. We'll see how that comes into play. Let's give an example using Ancestry.com, and let's search for Nikola Tesla's record. Nikola Tesla, excuse me. Anybody know who he is?
Yes. Generator.
Alternating current. He's the father of alternating current. If you've heard of Thomas Edison, you're surprised you haven't heard of Nikola Tesla. He actually worked with Edison for a while. They were then incompatible. Tesla was AC and Edison was DC. They eventually had a parting of the ways. But let's try and find Tesla's ship record. Let's do some web search on Tesla. I get some information. It says, shows that he came in at Castle Garden, so he's a good candidate to search for his Castle Garden record. But I love this other quote here. When he arrived at Castle Garden, his possessions consisted of 4 cents and calculations for designing a flying machine. The 4 cents would be typical of your arriving immigrants. The next part, of course, was not. Let's search for Tesla's record. We enter Nikola Tesla, do a search. This is using Ancestry, and here's his record. And you can view the image of the record. Here it is. It doesn't give too much information, but for what it's worth, he's Swedish. Gives his name. He's listed as a laborer. Let's try doing the same thing using CastleGarden.org. We'll enter just Tesla now. Do a search on him. And all we get is an Alfonso Tesla. We don't get Nikola Tesla. He's not there. I tried doing various searches on him, and I finally proved to myself that he's not in their database. He's there. He certainly arrived through Castle Garden, and he's at the Ancestry.com database. He's not in the CastleGarden.org. The CastleGarden.org is missing. They're not as thorough as Ancestry is. They're not as expensive as Ancestry is, but I guess in that case you get what you pay for. But what we can do, let's click on, we have Tesla, let's click on him. Well, let's at least point to him when we get what I call what's known as his passenger ID. With that number, I have another one-step form that lets me browse through the passenger records. Starting with that passenger ID, I can bring up Tesla's record, Alfonso Tesla, and I can step through the adjacent records for that. And as I start stepping through, I press the +1 button or +10, depending on how many steps I want to take. If I do the +1, I get to the next record. Well, I go +1, I get from Alfonso to Domenico to Nicola. This Nicola at first looked promising, but it's not Tesla for the last name, and it's the wrong year of arrival, so it's not him. He's not in the CastleGarden.org records at all. He is in the Ancestry.com records for Castle Garden. Besides New York, which is one of the major ports for processing passengers, passengers arrive through many other ports as well. They arrive through Boston, through Philadelphia, through Baltimore, etc. Well, there are one-step web pages for searching those ports too. Most of this data comes from Ancestry.com, but there are some free websites that are linked to. For example, for Galveston, there's the Texas Seaport Museum has the names up as well. That's free. Many of the others go through Ancestry, of course, that requires a subscription. If you don't have a subscription, go to your local library. Almost all libraries have a group subscription, and their patrons can use that at no charge. The ports that are covered in this other section are Baltimore, Boston, Galveston, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. And it covers the peak years. When I'm looking for the years post-1870, and I found for Baltimore, I found this group of years, for Boston, this range of years, etc. Each of these has a one-step website, and not just that, the triangle that we referred to previously, there's a trio of one-step websites for each one of those ports. Searching by name, searching by ship arrival, searching, accessing the microfilm roll directly. Next, census and Soundex. An overview of searching for the census record, the U.S. Census records. The easiest way to search the census is by name. You can search by name or by address. If you're lucky and you do a name search and find the person you want, that's certainly the easiest way to do it. But in many cases, you're not that lucky. Or in some cases, you're not that lucky. The name is very illegible on the census page. The transcribers who typed in what they saw there to make a searchable index couldn't read it, and they just guessed at what it was, and guessing may have been way off, and no searching at all will find it. But you have to know that the ancestry bureaus who you can't find by name, you know where he lived. So you want to search by address. Seems like a simple thing to do. Unfortunately, the census is not organized by address. It's organized by something called the ED, the enumeration district. You need to know the ED in order to search by address. Up until the one-step web pages, there was no easy way to go from address to ED. The one-step web page is a tool that takes you from the 1910 address, gives you the 1910 enumeration district. 1930, there's a one-step tool that takes you from 1930 address to 1930 enumeration district. In 1920, rather than putting up a tool that takes you from the address to that district, we put up a tool that converts a 1930 ED to a 1920 ED. So given an address, you find out, use the 1930 tool, find out what its ED was in 1930, then use the converter tool to convert that ED to the corresponding 1920 ED. That doesn't mean you're looking for where your ancestor lived in 1930. No, you know his address in 1920, but just use the 1930 tool to find out what ED corresponds to that address in 1930, and then convert that 1930 ED to a 1920 ED. So you do this as a two-step process. You do the one step to convert address to 1930 ED, and then use this tool to take 1930 ED to 1920 ED, and then you go, using the ED, go access the census. 1940, the same sort of thing. We'll have a converter tool. The press is working on this right now, converting the 1930 ED to the corresponding 1940 ED. So you'll be ready for this when the 1940 census opens in the year 2012. And then once you have the enumeration district, there's another one-step website that lets you go from the enumeration district to the census image. That's the hard way. The easy way is searching by name. You go directly from name to census image, if you're lucky. 1910 has a special problem. The linking on Ancestry for 1910 has serious problems because they took the database from Genealogical.com for 1910. And when Ancestry and Genealogy merged, Genealogy had the 1910 index, Ancestry did not. When they combined it, their links, initially they had no links. And we started a project with volunteers to generate all the links that I needed. The Ancestry has since put up their links, but many of them are incorrect. Some of them work, some of them don't. So in that case, we have this one-step tool that takes you 1910 name. Using either the one-step tool or the Ancestry site, you can go from 1910 name to a set of coordinates. And you'll see what in a second what I mean by coordinates. I have an example. And then a one-step tool that takes those coordinates to the census image. I'll give examples of all this. So this will all be solidified for you. Let's start by searching using the 1910 and 1930 census ED finder. Given searching by address, we want to find the ED for 1910 or 1930. We'll start with 1930. We'll look for 138 Eagle Street in Albany, New York. Anybody know what address that is? Governor's Bench. Okay, so I go to the one-step website for converting an address to an ED in 1930. I enter New York. I enter Albany. When I enter New York, I get a list of cities. I select Albany. When I select Albany, I get a list of streets. I'll select Eagle Street, and I get a list of EDs. So Eagle Street passes through all these enumeration districts. Well, I'm not going to search through each one, so I want to narrow this down some more. I go down to this part of the website, which asks for a house number on Eagle Street. I enter 138. I click on a mapping button. This will bring up a contemporary map of the neighborhood. And assuming that the neighborhood hasn't changed, some cities there have been massive changes. And in that case, this mapping will fail. But for cities where there have not been massive changes, I can bring up the mapping of 138 Eagle Street, and I see the cross streets are Park Avenue, South Swan. Going back to the one-step site, I bring up, select the street, I'll select Park Avenue, and then select South Swan, and when I get those three streets in, the enumeration district is down to one ED. It's the ED common to all those three streets. So now I know that 138 Eagle Street is an ED 1-66. And at this point, I can also press on this button that says View Microfilm. This will take me to another one-step tool, the one-step tool that goes directly from ED to census image. I could enter that tool from the main page and fill in the ED that I want. By clicking here, I come into that tool with the city and the ED already pre-filled for me, the state, the county, and the ED, etc. And I can just, I'm ready to press on the display button. But before I do that, I can even note the NARA roll number and even the FHL roll number. If I'm down at NARA or National Archives or at the Family History Library, I'm not going to look at the physical microfilm. But if I'm online, I would just click on the display button, and up comes the first frame for that ED, and I step through looking for 138, looking for Eagle Street, and I get to a page that has Eagle, I look for 138, and there's Honorable Franklin Roosevelt, with his wife Anna E. Roosevelt. And here you wrote for his wife's name was Eleanor. There's his children, etc. His secretary. And at 150 Eagle Street, there's Anthony Garfuti, a truck driver. On the same census page. If I continue, there's actually a laborer at the next house. There's no class distinction made on the census pages. They just continue down the block. His occupation was governor. His industry was capital. And there's Garfuti, the truck driver in the truck business. Next to the governor of capital is a number, 9693. Those numbers are sometimes useful. They were added later by the census takers after they collected the information. They put this down for statistical purposes. They know how many people there are of each different kind of occupation. So that number ties into the occupation. And if you can't read what's written here, it would be nice maybe to look up what does 9693 mean. For that, there's another one-step website, which lets you look up the census codes. And here we enter 9693, and that's the code for officials and inspectors United States. So it tells me something about that occupation. And again, if I couldn't read what was written at all, I would at least have some hint about what it might have been. 1920 to 1930 ED converter. And I have I know for 138 Eagle, I know it's 1-66. Let's say I want to find the person living in that house in 1920 at 138 Eagle. So I used the 1930 ED finder, I got the ED number, I enter that into the converter, 1-66, and it tells me there are three different EDs that overlap 1-66, ED 74, 76, and 77. I go through those one by one. Starting with 74, when I didn't find Eagle Street, I get to 76. There's ED 76, I find Eagle Street, I find 138, and there's Alfred E. Smith, governor of New York in 1920. 1930 to 1940 converter, as I said. We're in the process of working on that now. We've only done the first three states, Alabama, Arizona, and Arkansas. So if you know something in one of those states, you can actually use this and find the ED for 1940. We went to a 1930 ED, and it would list the corresponding 1940 EDs. And at the bottom, you even have a reminder as to how many days left until the 1940 census is over. We promised that we will have this all 50 states completed long before the 1940 census is available. Okay, that was census search by address. Let's do a search by name. Let's search in Washington, D.C. I know there was somebody named Herbert Hoover living there. So let's do a search, Herbert Hoover, District of Columbia, submit. This is going to be a name search, they're much easier to do. Do that, and lo and behold, I find two Herbert Hoovers living in Washington, D.C. in 1930. One of them was in jail. So I guess I know which one I want, but there's really not that much difference between them. Both live in big white houses surrounded by high security perimeter fences. But I'll assume I want the head of household. Click on his census image, and there's Herbert Hoover with his wife and son, and his various domestic help, cooks and housekeepers and so forth. His occupation is president. His industry is the United States. His occupation code, the same 9693 that we saw for Franklin Roosevelt. The street, rather than giving the street as Pennsylvania Avenue, it just has White House. And in fact, that's the end. I showed a blank line. There's nothing more on this page. In Washington, D.C., they do have class distinction on the census pages. Let's continue searching by name. In 1910, as I mentioned, in 1910 there were problems with linking. So let's see how those linking problems come into account. Search for John D. Rockefeller in 1910 using the one-step page. I actually find two John D. Rockefellers, but that's not, that's good news because they are father and son. And I want to click on their census image, but there's no link to the census image. Or at least there wasn't when I made up the slide. Ancestry has since put up the links, but not all the links work. I don't know what these, how often it fails, but there's a high number of cases where you'll get linked to the wrong page completely. So the work that my volunteers did of converting the coordinates that you do get to the actual microfilm image is still very useful to have. We thought we'd pull that site down when they put these links up, but since the links are done so poorly, this next slide is quite useful. Let's show how this is used. On the first result, where we search by name, we got the name here. We click on the name, and it gives me a certain amount of information. It tells me it's on series 624, roll 1043, part 1, page 2868. There's no way you can use that information on the Ancestry site to get to an image. But using the one-step site, you can enter that information exactly as you see here. The state, the roll, the part, the page, and the section B. Sorry, 286B is part of the page. You click on display, and that will take me to John Sr.'s record. This is John Rockefeller Sr., occupation president of an oil company. He's living with his wife, who's a school teacher. I guess times were tough and he had to send his wife out to work. And his wife's sister is living with him also. She's also helping to support the family. And it's clear why they had to go out to work with all the servants they had to support. Living in the same building, I guess the next apartment, is Florence Twombly, who that name might not be familiar to anybody, but she was the granddaughter of Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was the richest man in the U.S. at that time. And when I do this talk, I'm always surprised at some of the reaction I get when I mention this. In Washington, I gave the talk, and somebody said, shaking their head, "Oh, yes." I said, "Oh, you know Florence?" She says to me, "Yes." Had I not clipped off the servants for Florence, she would have seen her great-grandmother or whatever it was. Looking at John Jr.'s record, John Jr. lists his occupation as a capitalist. His industry as capitalist. His wife and daughter aren't working. And there's his list of servants. Okay, so that shows how to search using Ancestry. I can also search using Genealogical.com. I have a one-step website that links to that. In that case, I can search for John D. Rockefeller again. In 1910, here I get the information with a link that says go to page. Because this is Genealogy's database, their links always work. Now, most of you don't have dual subscriptions. If you have one subscription, you'll have two Ancestry. So this might not be of any good. But if you're at a library, they might have the other subscription as well. Change street names. If you're doing this kind of searching in the census, in many cases you run into places where street names in various cities have changed. Well, Joel Weintraub has done an exceptional job of going through and making lists for some 200 cities, listing all street names and the new street names. I'm impressed when I see the size of this list. If your city is not on this list, it probably only has 2 or 3 streets in it anyhow, so well, I guess all the fun is not here. The Oliphant streets will include the streets of Oliphant. Next, I should mention on this list that Joel's done, Many of them are his own tables that he's found books and so forth and put together the tables. In other cases, he's found websites that already have the information on it, so these are links then to other people's websites. So it's both a combination of links to websites plus Joel's own table that he's put up on the web. Soundex. Soundex, you probably will know what it is, but in case you don't, it's a code that's associated with a name such that names that sound alike will get the same code. Why is that useful? Because if you're doing a search and you're not sure of the spelling, or if there are various spellings on the name, you can search by the code number and get all names that sound like the name you're looking for. Even though the name might be misspelled, you'll still find the person that you're looking for. Soundex is used an awful lot in census records, which is why I have it in the census section of the website. Here's the one-step page, and there are two different Soundex codes that I help you find. You enter a name, and as you do that, the Soundex code will appear for the American Soundex and the Dates-Mokatov Soundex. American Soundex is used by the National Archives. So all the records, all the census records that they have are all indexed by the American Soundex. Dates-Mokatov Soundex has been optimized for Eastern European names. Be that as Ashkenazi Jewish names, if you want. So all the information on Jewish Gen website, and that's more than just Jewish. Jewish Gen is Eastern European. It's not just Jews. So anybody searching for Eastern European records, search on Jewish Gen. All their databases are indexed using the Dates-Mokatov Soundex. So let's go through an example and see, how you get the Soundex code. And why would you need the Soundex code? If you're searching on a website, any website worth its salt will do the Soundex calculation for you. It'll probably have a box saying, search for things that sound like Irving Berlin or whatever, but you don't have to put in the code number. They'll compute that code number and then search for all records that have that same code number. But I found websites that, surprisingly, the webmaster didn't understand this, and he makes you type in the Soundex code. So you would have to look up or compute somehow, get the Soundex code for the name you're looking up. If you're look up the old-fashioned way by going down to archives using microphone readers, then of course there too you'd have to manually compute the Soundex code. So that's where this website is useful. And let's go through an example of a name that I always have trouble spelling and see what the Soundex codes are. Being from California, I should know how to spell this name, but I don't. Let's see the spelling of Schwarzenegger. And we'll enter Schwarzenegger and get the American Soundex code, which is S625, and the Dates-Mokatov code are actually two different Soundex codes. Matching either one of them will work. Let's try misspelling Schwarzenegger and see what happens to the Soundex codes. Let's do an SH instead of SCH, a very obvious way of misspelling it. I get the S625 again, and I get the same DM codes. So any system based on either American Soundex or DM Soundex will still find Schwarzenegger even with this misspelling. Let's try another misspelling, TS instead of Z. Again, a very obvious way to misspell it. In that case, the American Soundex is different. It's S632. The DM code, only one now, but it's one of the two that we had from before. So any search system based on DM Soundex will still work. You still find him with this misspelling, but using the American Soundex code, you won't find him. You don't have control over which Soundex code is in use. That's whoever put the data up, put the data together will index it with a certain Soundex code. Depending upon which Soundex code they use, you might or might not find Schwarzenegger. And it's obvious, it makes sense that you find him with the DM Soundex code, since it's an Austrian name, that's Eastern European. So it makes sense that DM coding would be better suited for Schwarzenegger than the American Soundex code would be. But I don't know, I still think Gray Davis was so much easier to spell. Next section of the website has to deal with the New York Census. New York actually had the bulk of immigrants, and most of the people settled in New York before moving on. In fact, I was on Los Angeles just last week, and I heard that 1/3 of the immigrants that came into New York settled there. Then the other 2/3 moved on. So many of your ancestors, even though maybe in different parts of the country now, may have spent some time in New York. So the New York Census records are very important for doing any genealogy work. And New York had their own census taken in various census years, particularly 1905, 15, and 25. They were took in earlier years as well, but those censuses didn't survive as well and were not as useful. But these 3 years, 05, 15, 25, are very useful. And again, they're not indexed by name. In fact, they're not online at all. The images are not online. But to search by address, you have to know something called an AD and an ED. That's like the enumeration district for federal. In the New York terms, it's an assembly district and election district. You need to know the AD-ED pairs, and there's no easy way to get them. So, and I did some of these searches the old way, before the One-Step website, trying to find some of my family, and I spent a whole day just getting the ADs and EDs. It was challenging. Well, the One-Step website lets you select which borough you want, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, Staten Island, or the Bronx, and which of the years, and we'll bring up a AD-ED finder for that borough in that year. Initially, we had a lot of gray areas. Gray means we haven't done it yet. Currently, only these two Bronx boxes are still gray. This was just done last week, Staten Island, so that's no longer gray. One by one, we're filling this in. Joel Weintraub will be giving a talk on this in June, actually August, and I'll be giving some talks on this before then. We hopefully by the time I give those talks, this will be all filled in. All white, so you can do searches for any of those census years in any of those boroughs. Beside the New York City census, which then requires you to then get the microfilm and look things up, one of my volunteers who's worked on some other projects with me decided she wanted to single-handedly go through the Brooklyn census records from 1925 and transcribe every single name. Now that's a massive undertaking, one person doing it. I don't think it'll ever get done, but it's amazing how much she has gotten done. And in fact, this shows, red means she hasn't done it yet. The greens are done, the yellows are partially done. There may be more now, I made this slide a while ago. But what's surprising is I took this, I never told her where my family lived, so she didn't pick my sections first, but I went and searched my family name, and it was there. So, in spite of the fact she has very little, it's still very useful. And maybe someday it'll be finished. Births, deaths, and other vital records. Let's search for birthdays. Let's, as an example, let's search for Richard Nixon. The One-Step website, you enter Richard M. Nixon. There may be more than one. I assume that it's a common name, so there may be more than one of those. So I'll bracket it by year. Since I know he ran for presidential candidate in 1960 against Kennedy, I would assume he wasn't born before 1900 and probably not after 1920. So I'll bracket it by that, do my search, and I actually found two Richard Nixons. And this one happens to be the correct one. The one that was two Richard M. Nixons, and this one is the one who was president. So I was able to find Richard Nixon using the search. For those of you who know this, I used to type it to anybirthday.com. That was a very famous website. Had all this information. They went offline last June. Well, I found someplace to tap into, so I still have the birthday sites, and I find, I get statistics on my website on different hits that I get, and especially these search items that people search, Google searches that people do to get to my website. And the biggest thing that directs them to my website, people searching for anybirthday.com to see what happened to it. They write it on my website, and they're still able to then find the birthdays of people they want. Okay, this was interesting in finding Richard Nixon, but of course he's deceased. What the scary part about this is that you can find living people. And that means you can find birthday for your next door neighbor who never wanted to tell you how old she was, or your cousin who kept her birthday or her age secret from the family. Let's, as an example, search for George W. Bush. And in this case, I'll narrow it down by zip code. For Texas, zip code starts with a 7. How do I know the zip codes for Texas start with a 7? There's another One-Step website we'll get to shortly. But I'll just enter that now, and I actually get several George W. Bushes from zip code 7. Zip code starting with 7. And let's search for George H. Bush, and I get several of those from zip code starting with 7. And the father-son presidential team is this one here and here. So they have not escaped being in the database. Living people as well as deceased people are in this database. So this is, as genealogists, it's very useful because you can then get more information on your family and fill various things in. Social Security Death Index. This, of course, is only searching for dead people. Let's search for Richard M. Nixon. And we get 4 hits on Richard M. Nixon, and the correct one is over here. Tells me his date of death, his date of birth, where he died, where the benefit was paid, if any, the Social Security number, and where his SS card was issued. The Social Security number is, of course, very useful if these are relatives of yours. You can then send for the original Social Security application and find out information to what the person put down at that time, which may have more genealogical information on it. And in the case of Nixon, we could actually send for this and find out what else he lied about. Now, I learned that you have to be careful to know something about your audience before you give these talks. I gave this talk in Whittier, California about a year ago. And no one told me that Whittier was Nixon's birthplace. And I had no idea why I got no laughs on this. Searching, okay, notice when I searched for Richard and Nixon, one of the items on this form was the search engine to use. And I have RootsWeb Plus. Let me explain that in a little more detail. There are what I call 6 primary sites for the SSDI information on the web. And they come from Ancestry, from the LDS site. As you can see here, all these sites. There are many other sites that give you the SSDI information, but they will do by linking to one of these 6 primary sites. The one-step website lets you specify which primary site you want to fetch the data from. And that's useful because some sites might have different search parameters for the different sites. So in fact, if you go back, you'll see some of the information is disabled because using this particular search engine, you can't enter continent, or you can't do contains for the last name. So I gray out the information you can't enter for that search engine. By changing the search engine, different things get grayed out. So the one-step SSDI site lets you specify which of those primary search engines to use. But in particular, RootsWeb Plus there's a RootsWeb site, but what is RootsWeb Plus? RootsWeb Plus is my own addition, my own extension of RootsWeb. I find RootsWeb has the least number of limitations. Some of them have limitations of only putting in 3 characters for the last name, etc. RootsWeb has the least number of limitations, and I was able to add code to get around each of RootsWeb's limitations. So by doing so, I have what I call RootsWeb Plus. You can use the one-step form and specify RootsWeb, or you can do RootsWeb Plus and get still more powerful searches. New York naturalization records. Let's say I want to find the naturalization records, well, not for Colin Powell, because he was born in New York, but from some article I found on Colin Powell, it indicates that he was born to immigrant parents. His parents being Cole and Luther Powell, and, he's called Luther Powell. His father was Luther Theophilus Powell, and his mother was Maud Ariel Powell. So the 2 of them were immigrants. Let's see and they settled in Harlem. Let's see if they're in the immigration database for New York. I enter last name sounds like Powell, do a search, and I have several Powells, but there is Luther Theophilus and Maud Ariel. This information comes from the Italian Genealogy Society's website. New York incarceration records. If any of you are fortunate enough to have members of your family who spend time in some penal institutions, you can search on their name. Let's search on David Berkowitz. Anybody know who he is? Okay, you didn't know who Meyer Lansky was, but at least you know who Berkowitz is. Search on him. He has this entire rap sheet. Second-degree murder, indicates his sentence, 25 years to life, his parole hearing dates, etc., etc. Other records, New York City birth, New York City marriage, Illinois death records, a whole host, various other sites. And why am I adding these? Why don't I just add in, there's California records, why haven't I put that in there? I'm not just trying to make a compendium of all different records that are on the web. Cindy's list does a nice job of that. Rather, what I'm doing is putting in places where I can add value. So if there's value to be added, I will add it. In each of these cases, I found a search engine, a database with a search engine on those websites, but they're not searching in the optimal way. I found that I could do a better search on their data than they're doing, let you search for more parameters, and in those cases, I've added a one-step site for doing those kinds of searches. Locating couples. This is an interesting website. Let's say you want to find John and Mary Smith. Well, you want to search for John Smith. There'll be an awful lot of John. Sorry to make it Doe. There are an awful lot of John Does in the country. So if I search for John Doe, I'll get several thousand. If I search for Mary Doe, I get several thousand. But I know that my cousins John and Mary are living together. John and Mary Doe. Maybe I could search for them as a couple. Using this one-step website, I searched for them. This ties to Intellius, which is a paid website, but the first part of the information they give you for free. So up to this point, you pay no money, and I can actually narrow down, even though they'll give me thousands of John Does, there's thousands of Mary Does, I'll combine those and find the John and Mary Does together, and display only those in my results. So here's, I'm sorry, let's say Smith. Okay, John and Jane Doe, not John and Mary. Okay, all the John and Jane Does. There's one in Florida, one in Georgia, one in Maryland, 3 in Massachusetts. At first I thought it was the same person, just moved around, but the ages are different. So there are actually 6 different couples named John and Jane Doe living in the U.S. Phone book lookups. I think there are various ways of searching for U.S. phone book entries on the web. There's anywho.com, switchboard.com, Yahoo. Each of these have their limitations. Anywho requires that you give a state. You can't search the entire country. Switchboard stops giving you results after you get the first 400. It just doesn't give you any more. Yahoo gives all the results. That's a good one. But all of them are limited to either 10 or 15 per page. You might want to see any more per page. Well, the one-step site, I use Yahoo because it gives all the results, but I'll give 100 hits, up to 100 hits per page, and I let you search on street address, which you couldn't do by doing Yahoo directly. Relationship calculator. As genealogists, we come across various relations in our family, and second cousin 3 times removed, and maybe some of you know what that means, maybe others don't. So I have this little calculator, but I found people did have trouble with that. So you could type in your, pressing the various buttons, you would click fathers, mothers, and it builds up fathers, mothers, brothers, son, and it tells you that's your first cousin twice removed. Well, you think, okay, yeah, it's a little hard, but I can still do that. They don't use kind of a website to do it for me. Let me give you an example of my wife's family. This is a true example. It sounds so preposterous that it sounds like it was made up, but it's not. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, if you will. But the example, the relationships are exactly as they. I was very surprised to discover this when I researched her family. Her great-grandfather, we'll call him Abe, they had more children, but the 3 children of interest are Bob, Betty, and Bill. Betty had daughters Clara and Kathy. Bob married Clara. That was his niece. They had a son, Dave. Bill had a son, Carl. Kathy married Carl. That's her first cousin. Kathy and Carl had a daughter, Debbie. Dave married Debbie, who was his first cousin, his second cousin, and his first cousin once removed. Well, I guess that calculator comes in handy when you want to do that kind of a calculation. And again, I have to admit, I did not, these relationships are true. For a whimsical change of pace, people kept writing to me and said, how do I find my grandfather? Come on, I'm not going to look up your grandfather for you. So I put up this little website for them. Where's grandpa? You click on that, and you come up. Your great-grandfather cannot be found. The answers you're looking for is currently unavailable. Your family tree might be experiencing difficulties, and they need to use the family members. And you can continue reading, and you'll see other lines in there. I'll leave it to you to read to actually click on it and read through it. Surprisingly enough, every so often I get an email from somebody saying, hey, you know the link on your website for Where's Grandpa is broken. I'm amazed when I get those. I say, read carefully. The next section, calendar, sunrise, sunset, and maps. This is a section that my wife has problems with. She says, what's that got to do with genealogy? To which I reply, genealogy? Where does it say genealogy? One-step web pages by Stephen Morse. So these are, it's whatever tickles my fancy, whatever tickles my throat at the moment. Thank you. So whatever I'm interested in, whatever strikes me at the moment, I'll put up a website. Many of the things are genealogy related, but not all. I'm interested in physics, so if you see a page called Solving Maxwell's Equations in One Step, don't be surprised. But these are just things that I played around with. I had an interest in Jewish calendar at one time, so I put up a web page for converting the Jewish dates to the secular dates. Put up a version of that. Computing sunrise and sunset. Given the location, you can specify see when sunrise and sunset occurred at any date for any location. You enter your date, you enter your location. This comes up in San Francisco, but you change it and put in whatever location you want. I have a table giving all major cities in the U.S. as well as abroad. And if your city is not listed there, if you want Oliphant, maybe it's a little different than Scranton. You can actually enter by latitude and longitude. If you don't know the what if you don't know the latitude and longitude? Wait, there's another one-step website that will help you with that. But this shows how you can get the sunrise and sunset for your location for any particular day. Many people then started writing to me and said, gee, I'd like to put up, if it's the Jewish day perhaps, if it's a synagogue's website, or somebody wanted the sunrise and sunset for that day to appear on their website. How can they link to my site to get that information? I put up some templates for them. So all you need, if you're a webmaster, to copy like 6 lines of code onto your website, and then you can display the times of sunrise and sunset for the current date. It will always appear on your website. For example, this is a synagogue in Florida. They have the candle lighting occurs at this time, because that's when sunset is. And the date is the 3rd of Heshvan, 5674. So this is, each day the correct date appears because they link to this template on the one-step website. Maps, let's say you want to get maps, especially area maps of different places. Initially there was only Global Explorer was the first, and people had to use Global Explorer to find the area maps. It's becoming more and more popular now, and there are many websites that do it, so I've slowly been adding the different buttons so you can go to whichever underlying website you want to use to find the aerial photos of your location. As an example, 350 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. Anybody know what that is? Empire State Building. I click on that. I'll use Globe Explorer first. And I have this nice aerial view of the Empire State Building. Globe Explorer then changed, and they decided they want to start selling these things, so they put their logo or watermark over this to make it more difficult to see. But they went to color, and if you want to pay them, they'll give it to you without the watermark. Well, along came Google, so I don't need to go Globe Explorer anymore. Google gives you a very nice aerial photo of the Empire State Building. This may be hard to see because there's an optical illusion. Each time I look at this, I initially see a ramp going into the earth. Some of you may see that, others will see the Empire State Building. Those of you who see the ramp going into the earth, I find if I rotate this by 90 degrees, you can see it very clearly. Curious, how many people saw the ramp? How many saw the Empire State Building the first time? What about foreign cities? Okay, so we just saw the aerial photo of New York. Let's look at foreign cities. Paris, France, for example. I can enter that on the one-step website. Click on the various link, and there's the aerial photo of Paris, France. And I can zoom in on this, get down to the street level and see houses. What about small foreign cities? In particular, the little towns in Eastern Europe where your ancestors might have come from. My family came from the town of Bereza, which is Russia in those days, which is Belarus today. I want to find an aerial photo of Bereza. Well, I need to know the longitude and latitude. How do I get that? Jewish Gen website, which you don't have to be Jewish. Just you need an Eastern European location. You enter the name of the town. They'll give you small shtetls, if you will. They'll give you the longitude and latitude. Using that, you transfer that to the one-step website, giving you the latitude and longitude. Click on the aerial photo, and there I have an aerial photo of the town that my family came from 100 years ago in the small town of Bereza. Zip code maps. Remember when we did George Bush, you didn't know that his zip code started with a 7. When I did this, I said, gee, there must be someplace on the web which lists the starting, for each number, what areas of the country does the zip codes 1 correspond to, what the zip code 2 correspond to. I couldn't find it. So I decided I'll just put up my own. I put up this map showing the 0 zip code, the 1 zip code, etc. There's the 7 zip code, and there's Texas right there. Beside that, I also added the first 3 digits. You can find out where the location is. This is ordered by the first 3 digits, or this is alphabetical, so this goes down, of course. So I get more information on the first 3 digits of a zip code. In addition, this website lets me enter an address and find the zip code. I can enter 1600, let's say I wanted to write to the person at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, tell him what I think of the job that he's doing. And I know that if I don't put a zip code, that's going to get returned. So I will go to the one-step website, I hit the Get Zip Code button, and compliments of the USPS, I know that the zip code is 20500-0003. What if I have a zip code and want to find out where it is? Suppose I got a letter from zip code 95671, and before I open it, I want to know, I don't know anybody there, who could this be? I look that up, click the Get Cities button, and I find out that's Folsom Prison. Latitude and longitude. I promised that there'd be a one-step website that lets you compute the latitude and longitude of any address. And to give an example to show it's not limited to the U.S., I'll do 10 Downing Street in London. And I enter the information, and I click on the latitude and longitude button, and there I get from Maporama, I get this information. From Travelogist, I get this information. You can enter your own address and find your exact latitude and longitude, and then enter your neighbor's address, and you'll see you're off by a few seconds of latitude or longitude. See, there's actually a difference just going, a few hundred yards down the block or whatever, and see how the latitude and longitude changes. If you're, for Jewish genealogy, this is not so important here, you're dealing with Hebrew characters, and the problem there is many people can't read those Hebrew characters, so I have some websites that let you convert from the Latin letters to, as you type it in, you'll see the Hebrew transliterations, and similarly type in the Hebrew letters and see the Latin transliterations. There are actually two different alphabets in use for Hebrew. There's cursive and print, so I have websites that let you convert from one to the other. I'll skip through that quickly. This is of interest, even though you may not be Jewish, you might want to do some lookups in the Israeli telephone directory, for example. Just to show the kind of things that the one-step website does. Let's look at how you would look up names in the Israeli phone directory before the one-step website. There is a website in Israel, just like switchboard.com in this country, which lets you do lookups, but it's all in Hebrew. First problem is how do you type in the name? I want to look up the name Weinstein. I have to type it in Hebrew letters. Let's assume I have some way of doing that. I assume I could read this, which I probably can't. Just guess that this is the name. And then I want to click on the search button. Probably one of these says search and one says reset, so I want to make sure I get the right one. Assuming I could think that the search comes first to the left and reset to the right. But of course Hebrew goes right to left, so maybe it's the other way around. Let's hope I get the right one, do my search. Then I come across I can sound this out. I know the Hebrew letters. This is telephone, but this I can't read at all. Here are the names which I might be able to sound out as Weinstein, Avied, and so forth. This is difficult. Even if you know the Hebrew letters, this is painstaking. On the one-step website, I type in the name Weinstein. I have different transliterations. I copy and paste them onto this form of Weinstein, where it says last name. I clearly hit the search button, and there I have the names transliterated. So all the Weinsteins are here. These things which I couldn't read before, and see now what they are. So the one-step website makes it very easy to use the Israeli telephone directory. Another website which shows all those who fell in Israel's wars. I'm not going through that, but the same sort of thing. It's in Hebrew, which you can't read. But from the one-step website, you can copy and paste the name into it, and then get something that is readable. Those of you might have some relatives coming from Russia. You might come across some Russian documents in Cyrillic. I have the same sort of websites that convert English to Russian, transliterate English to Cyrillic, the Cyrillic alphabet, or back in Cyrillic back to the back to Latin letters. And even notice there was a Hebrew Google site, a Russian Google site. So if you're dealing with this kind of alphabet, there are one-step web pages to help you do that. Finally, the next section, creating your own search applications. After I did, having done a lot of this, people have started writing to me saying, gee, we have this database of all the people, all the cemeteries in this Scranton area, we want to put it up on the web and make it searchable. Could you help us out and do a search application for us? And I have to say, gee, I really, I can't get involved because everyone is going to do this. Suppose I give you the tools for doing it. So I developed a set of tools that lets you, without knowing any programming whatsoever, you just turn the crank, describe your data, and that will give you the search form, the search engine. You just put it up on the web. And when you have a server on the web that you have access to, I'll give you everything you need. You plop it up on the web. So what you do, I call it a do-it-yourself website. You have to describe your data. You have the database. It's all the people buried in the Scranton area. In every cemetery, all the names. You want plot by plot, and you wrote down every name here. So you've done that. What you'd like is a search form where you can enter a name and press the search button. So these are the plays. There's a database, the search form, which I will give you. There's a search engine. The search form talks to the search engine. It sends the information that the user entered on the form to the search engine. The search engine does all the work. It cranks away and finds all the Mekulinskis in the database, and then we'll display a results page. So the results page was generated by the search engine, and this is what the user sees. The user sees the form and sees the results, doesn't see the search engine, but what you need is the code for the search engine and the code for the form. All that is what I give you. You describe the data. I have a standard format that you describe the data in, very simple. Turn the crank, and I'll give you the code for these two things that you put on your website. Miscellaneous section. This is the final section. Not much to do with genealogy now, but just things I'm interested in, as I said. Last minute bidding on eBay. Anybody who's done any bidding on eBay will quickly discover the optimal strategy is to bid in the last few seconds so nobody can raise your bid. What happens is there's auction fever. Somebody who wouldn't bid more than $25, but he sees that you've just bid $26, they say, well, I was limited to, I'll go to 27 because he's a 25 or 26. If they don't know you're going to bid that high and they've stuck their bid at 25, and you're at the last minute, the last few seconds going to 26, you'll win that auction. So the idea is to have your bid ready to be submitted, but don't submit it until the last few seconds. Well, you don't want to wait around. If it's 2 in the morning, you're not going to wait around to submit that, or maybe you're going out for the day. In fact, I just won an auction last week. I was out for the day, and I won the auction when I came home because I had filled out this form, but I didn't submit it until the last few seconds, and I turned out I was. And again, you put down the highest amount you're willing to pay. They're going to take from you what you need to beat the next highest person. So just because you put down $100, you might get it for $25. You put down honestly what the most is you want to pay. Another one-step website for bookmarks. I find that I use different browsers at different times on my computer, or I'm on different computers at different times, and I never have the right my bookmarks with me. Well, I have a set of universal bookmarks, which might look like this, but I can describe my bookmarks in this manner and have it accessible from any place I want. I'm skipping a lot of these, but the one-step portal, this is important for those of you who I notice are not taking notes today and don't remember all that I said. If you click on this, this is actually an article that I wrote, which is basically what the talk is that I've given today. So you can read through this and notice the slot for the Urban Berlin example, etc. Let's put all this together now. And this is the entire one-step website. Can you all read that in the back? Well, I could stand up here all day and talk about the virtues of the one-step website. But rather than doing that, let me give you testimonials from actual users. I've gotten literally tens of thousands of emails over the years. I started this in 2002, and I wouldn't believe the size of my folder that I have on all this. But of all those emails, 4 of them have a special place in my heart. Here's the first one. These are the only 4 emails I've never responded to. Ironically, they come in one every calendar year, which is, I thought, somewhat amazing. This is the 2003 submission. First one was anonymous with no name. This one is, at least Joe Dinger signed his name. Sounding it's a terrible website. Mike Dillon says that I'm wasting his time for the money I charged him. There are no fees for using any part of my website. Just those places where you link into paid databases, then you may need a subscription from the paid database, but there are no fees on the one-step website. And just a few minutes where I had my head. Well, now that you've seen these testimonials, you probably don't want to go to the one-step website. Let me tell you how not to get to the one-step website. You don't get there by going to SteveMorse.com. Because if you do that, you wind up on this guitarist who claims to have the official Steve Morse website. This is not the official Steve Morse website. This man is an imposter. This is not me. He doesn't even look like me. Or does he? Well, to tell you how to really get to the Steve Morse website, you go to stevemorse.org. Now, I go through all this, not to get the laughs, although I don't mind the laughs, but to make the point so nobody makes that mistake again of going to stevemorse.com. If you go to stevemorse.org, there is the one-step website. And with that, I'll take questions.
You said that Ancestry and Genealogy merged. Okay, so you could have the subscription to either or?
No, they've merged. It's one parent company, One person makes all the money there.
Okay.
But they still keep it separate, and they have separate subscriptions to each of the two databases, and you have to subscribe to one or the other, or both. If you subscribe to one, you don't get the other.
Oh, okay.
Now, as I said, genealogy had the 1910 census records. Ancestry didn't. So when they merged, Ancestry said, okay, we'll just use genealogy's records for that. But they did the linking wrong.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Would it be smart to use your website or your methodology locally rather than on the web? Say in the local office here, just use those tools to search the data rather than putting it on the web.
I'm not following the question.
In other words, say we had a Microsoft Access database and had all of this genealogy information. Instead of using the Access, just use your tools to search that data.
Using the tool that I have for creating your own search application.
Absolutely, yeah.
Using that tool, you want to search not on the web but locally. Yes, absolutely.
Just use the locally.
I was at a conference last year, an international conference, they wanted to give out databases as part of the conference material. They had a CD-ROM.
Right.
And they said, gee, can we use your search application to search locally on the CD-ROM? And the answer is yes. And that's what they did. They created all their search applications using my tool for creating the search application, but the data itself was on the CD-ROM, so they could run the whole search locally without being on the web.
And as a follow-up, what would be the best way to organize that data? Just in a large flat file?
You go through the tool that I have. It'll show you what the data is, and you start with a spreadsheet, for example, and you convert that to an ASCII file, and the actual format is specified in the frequently asked questions page is the user's manual.
So you could take data that was in Excel or some other database
Yep.
and
Yep.
oh, okay,
Yep.
super.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Steve, under miscellaneous, why did you say not to install pop-up blockers or spyware?
Oh, this is a pet peeve. People who write these pop-up, there's no need for a pop-up blocker in Spyware for the most part. Pop-ups were a problem years back when a lot of the legitimate sites were trying to advertise and bring popping up ads in the background. They've got such a bad name out of that all the honest sites no longer do that. If you go to porno sites, I don't know what your habits are, then you probably will still get them. But for the most part, there are not that many pop-up ads coming up on the web. Spyware is something you don't get by, contrary to popular belief, you do not get spyware by going to visit websites. You can only get spyware if you download a program. You have to explicitly do a download. If you're downloading stuff that you don't know what it is, you get what you deserve. So spyware and pop-ups should not really be a problem. Yet, they were a problem at one time, and these, what I think are unscrupulous, even the majors are doing this, have marketed pop-up blockers as spyware blockers. And they've done it in such a manner that they throw out the baby with the bathwater. So they'll throw out they'll block legitimate things as well. I have spent more time than I care to admit to fixing up my website because a pop-up blocker is no longer letting the ED numbers for where I bring up a window in the background, I bring up a separate window which has the ED numbers. They're blocking that, saying, "Oh, that looks like an ad. We don't want to let you bring that up." And one by one, they had to figure out what was their criteria. They had the most idiotic criteria. If I had JavaScript and I was bringing up something on another frame, but I was using JavaScript in this parent frame, these are technical things, had nothing to do with being an ad or not. They decided that's probably an ad because he did all that. So then I had to figure out what their logic is and then just do it differently so that they don't think it's an ad. But I am dealing against the people who write these pop-up blockers and spyware blockers. You pick my hat. Yes. So the point is, many things will not work on my website and other websites as well if you have these pop-up blockers and spyware blockers installed. Other questions? Yes.
What kind of relationship do you have with a lot of the commercial databases? I know early on there was a problem with Ellis Island. You were doing it better.
Okay, what kind of relation do I have with these other? None. None whatsoever.
Okay, you don't, seek permission or ask?
No.
But I know Ellis Island recognized that you were doing it better than they could ever. I appreciate it.
A lot of the data that's out there is data that's image data. It's not indexed, and you have to scroll through it. Is anyone working on ways to convert this to index data?
You've got to go through it and transfer it. You can't do OCR for the most part because we're handwritten data. does not lend itself to being OCR. It's optical character recognition.
Right.
An automated process for taking care of the data. You just have to hire, or not hire, get a whole team of volunteers like I did, and go through all records and do the transcribing or whatever. Any other questions? Going once?
Good, thank you.